Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It is time for another edition of the College Football Stock Market here on the Jagwagon Sports Network. And I'm going to run you through some teams who I'm buying into, selling off, and putting a hold on after week 10 of college football. Can't believe it's already this far into the season. It's sad to think that we only have a few more weeks of this left. But nonetheless, we're going to take a deep dive into a bunch of teams today. I have five lined up here that we're going to talk about and giving you my forecast outlook on how I think the rest of their season is going to go. It's the first day of college basketball season, so of course I got to rep my boys in Villanova. But let's go ahead and get this week's edition of the college football stock market started. We take a look back at who I bought, sold, and held on last week. I bought into Virginia Tech and Boise State, two teams that lost this past week. Obviously, when I bought into Virginia Tech, they had an outside shot at the ACC title. That's not really what I was buying into. I bought into the belief I think they can get to a bowl game, and I still think that's possible. I didn't have them beating Louisville. The outcome was a little upsetting for that because just with how tight I feel like they played Florida State. But Louisville was hungry and determined in this game. I still have confidence in Virginia Tech going forward. Boise State played Fresno State very, very close. That was a very good game for Boise State. Again, I was buying into them more for the fact that I think they can make a bowl game after their slow start to the season. I also bought on the Georgia and Troy, two teams that won this past week. Troy handled South Alabama. Um, no issues there, and Washington beat Missouri at home. Teams I sold on were Maryland, UNC, and Syracuse. Um, all two of these teams lost. Maryland and Syracuse. UNC beat Campbell at home, so not really anything impressive there. But Maryland gets destroyed by Penn State at home, 51-15. Syracuse lost to Boston College at home in just a sloppy game for them. They continue to disappoint, and I don't really see Syracuse making a bowl game. Um, Teams I put holds on were Washington and Kansas State. Washington with a 10-point victory over USC. So everything looks good there, but I'm still worried about their upcoming schedule. They have Utah this weekend, Oregon State, and then Washington State. So three pretty difficult games for them. I know Washington State doesn't look, very good the past couple weeks, this past weekend especially. But it's a rivalry game. You never know what's going to happen in those. Kansas State, if you're gonna go for a 4th down, you need to have a proper 4th down play. That's you're on the 4-yard line. It's essentially an extended two-point conversion play. That was a horrible play calling. I'm fine with you going for it on 4th down there. Let's end the game right here. We're on the road. We're in a hostile environment, at a very good team in Texas. Um, that was just the wrong play call, horrible execution. I mean, I don't even know what the vision was there at all. But nonetheless, they lose this past week, which was my concern. A lot of people were starting to put their name back into um, Big 12 championship conversation. I didn't quite see that, but I mean, hey, if they got past Texas, we'll buy into it. But with a loss, they're right back where I expect them. Still a pretty good season. I still expect them to win a couple more games here down the stretch. So let's go ahead and dive into this week's picks on who I'm buying and selling. And first up, I'm going to buy into Alabama. I said this in my recap I do after all the games on Saturday. This is just starting to feel like an Alabama team that's going to back into a national title. And I don't want to call it backing into um, because that's not how you win national championships. You don't just back into them. But this is a Bama team that just feels like those past Bama teams where they're just absolutely dominant. Doesn't seem like anything can go wrong the rest of the season. I mean, you look at their upcoming schedule here. They're at Kentucky. I feel like that can be a trap game, but I think Alabama handles them. Then they play Chattanooga, and then they're at Auburn. Auburn, again, a rivalry game. That's going to be a tight affair. But if I think they make it through these three games, and then you're looking at right now a one-on-one matchup with Georgia. Um, I really like how Alabama's playing. Ever since that USF game, this team has found another gear. It almost started to look like they were falling into another lull there against Texas A&M was a tough opponent, but Arkansas was the one that really scared me. 24-21 victory there. Arkansas fought their way back into that game. Looked like they might even find a way to pull off the upset. Alabama saves that off. Then they're playing Tennessee. They're down 14 points. At the halftime of the Tennessee game, some kind of switch flipped on this Alabama team. They come out in the second half and just manhandle Tennessee. They play LSU at home this past weekend and just dominate what I felt like was one of the best offenses in the country. They still gave up about 500 yards, but still to hold them to 28 points, they forced a Jaden Daniels interception. They just looked impressive on both sides of the ball in this game against LSU, and is beginning to become a scary looking Alabama team going forward. I think they're gonna have a ton of momentum as long as they make it through these 3 games, when they play Georgia. This is just starting to feel like one of those Alabama teams that's just gonna, find themselves in the playoffs or, even the national championship game. And that is a scary thought compared to just looking at where they were to start the season. Staying in the SEC, a team I'm gonna sell on is Florida. I really feel like they just blew their last chance to make a bowl game this season, with that loss to Arkansas at home. They beat Vanderbilt on the road. That was, or at home, excuse me. That was a fine game. Then they played South Carolina. That's supposed to say at South Carolina. Really a game they felt like it felt like they should have lost. But they find a way to win. It's okay. They got a little momentum here. They're going, against Georgia down in Jacksonville. They got some momentum behind them. Who knows what happens here? And then they get stomped 43-20. Okay, you're gonna go home, lick your wounds. You're playing a very bad Arkansas team at home. Just take care of business and you'll win. And they let Arkansas hang around the entire game. It goes overtime. They kick a field goal in their possession, and Arkansas goes right down the field and they score, and they get a huge win. First time that Arkansas has beat Florida in Gainesville in the swamp. And then you look at this upcoming schedule, and it is brutal for the Gators. At LSU and at Missouri, two very good teams in the SEC, and then they're home against Florida State. I don't see them getting another win here. I don't see them winning any of those 3 games, and I really feel like we're gonna see Florida, miss out on a bowl game this season, especially with how they started to look towards the middle of the year. This is really surprising after that win against Tennessee. You know, dr Looked like Florida had found something, and they've been improving, improving, improving every week. And now here we are back to back, just difficult, ugly losses, and now a grueling upcoming schedule. Next team I'm gonna sell on as well is Oklahoma. Everybody, including me, were very high on this team after their start to the season. They start 5-0, and then they go and they beat Texas and Dallas. 34-30, a fantastic game, game of the year. And they go into their bye week. They come out, they look rusty and shaky against USF or UCF. But again, a lot of people chalked it up to, well, yeah, they're showing some cracks, but they're also coming off a bye week. It's difficult to have a bunch of momentum, go into a bye week, and come out and still look as good. Um, but we shook it off. They go on the road to Kansas and they lose that game 38-33. A lot of the same mistakes they just made it again in the UCF game, they made in this game as well. They just did not look good at all in the Kansas game. Failed to put them away, and Kansas comes back and they win that game. Then they go on the road to Oklahoma State, the final Bedlam game, a very talked about matchup. And you go on the road. They looked ugly in this game on offense, multiple turnovers, 3 turnovers, a lot of just ugly fumbles. And then they really struggled to move the ball at times. They didn't convert on fourth down, I think 3 times, which is just, as an Oregon fan, it's a recipe for disaster. And they lose this game. Now you're looking at their upcoming schedule. It's going to be difficult for them to even get their names back into Big 12 championship conversation here. Never mind the playoffs at this point, but they have West Virginia, who's a pretty good team. They're somehow 13-point favorites against West Virginia right now. West Virginia is coming off just obliterating UCF and BYU in back-to-back weeks. They looked very good the last 2 weeks, whereas Oklahoma has not. I don't see that being a 13-point spread. Um, and what or Oklahoma needs to be on their A game for that, and it's gonna be difficult to get up for that, licking your wounds, coming off 2, pretty devastating losses, and like I said, you just removed yourself from playoff contention. You still have everything in front of you for the Big 12. It's still gonna be a fight to get to that championship game, but I don't see that spread being 13, and then they're at BYU, who's one of the most bipolar teams I've seen in college football this season, and then they have TCU at home. I see them winning 2 of these 3 games for sure, but, this West Virginia game is again, I don't understand how it's a 13-point spread. And I just going forward, I don't see Oklahoma making the Big 12 championship game unless something drastic happens ahead of them, which is very possible. Back to a team I'm buying in on, and it's gonna be NC State. I'm really impressed with how this team's played the past couple weeks. They now have a rallying cry behind them. During College Game Day when, they were at the Utah-Oregon game, Steve Smith was a guest picker, and he said, "NC State's getting ready for basketball season," and then he picked Clemson to beat them. Um, and then after the game, after NC State, they hang on, they get the victory. Dave Doran has some choice words, for Steve Smith, and it's an iconic soundbite, but now it's also a rallying cry for this team, something they can get behind. And then they have Miami come to town this past week, and they just manhandled Miami for 4 quarters, get a 20-6 victory, a much improved team from what we saw at the beginning of the season. I really like how NC State's playing right now, and I can see this team ending up 9-3, which is I don't think a lot of people saw them at that point towards the beginning of the year, and here they are 9-3. I think even at one point I sold on NC State, but here we are. If you look at their upcoming schedule at Wake Forest, at Virginia Tech, and then they have UNC at home. UNC obviously kind of a far fall from where they were just, at the beginning of the season. And I said this before, NC State really seems to have UNC's number the past couple of years. Even the best UNC teams haven't been able to find ways to get past NC State. Who knows what's going to happen this year? But and then at Virginia Tech, it's going to be a pretty difficult game because at that point, Virginia Tech is still going to be fighting to make a bowl game. They're going to need to win 2 of the last 3 games to make a bowl. They're at Boston College this week, and then they have this game with NC State coming to town, and then they have Virginia in the final week. So they need to pick up 2 out of 3 victories, and so they're going to be fighting. That's going to be a very hard fought battle. And so that's not an easy game by any means. But I definitely see NC State winning at least 2, maybe even 3 games. If they can win all 3, then you're talking about them going through their bowl game with a chance to get to a 10-win season, which again is somewhere I don't think anybody saw this team being, just a few weeks ago. But nonetheless, very impressed with their turnaround. Ever since they got rid of Brennan Armstrong at quarterback, this has been a different team, and I'm very impressed with how they looked the past couple weeks. So I'm going to buy into their record here. Um, Next team I'm gonna put a hold on is, Tulane. They're sitting at 8-1 right now, and their one loss being at home to Ole Miss. They didn't have Pratt in that game, um, and the reason I'm putting a hold on Tulane is because of how they played the last 3 weeks. So we did a live stream when they played Memphis. We did our Swear Jar Sweat. We watched that game, 31-21 victory. They looked pretty good on both sides of the ball. And then they go and they played North Texas at home, and that score says 35-28. They were up 28-7 in that game, and they let North Texas come storming back, and then it took a late fourth quarter touchdown for them to go ahead 35-28. So ugly result, but hey, just shake it off. We'll go to the next week. They play Rice, who's a pretty decent team. And they led 30-7 in that game. And Rice comes storming back. It's a 30-28 victory. And then this past weekend at East Carolina is one of the worst teams in college football and absolutely in the American. And they trailed in that game 10-0. And then it took until the second quarter, I think they made it 10-10. And then it took until late into the fourth quarter for them to make it 13-10. So they've just been playing ugly football the past couple weeks. They're still finding ways to win, which is the key. Um, but with Air Force losing this past week, everybody's now looking at Tulane to be, the repeat favorite, to go back to a New Year's Six bowl for the group of 5. You look at their upcoming schedule here, it's not the easiest schedule. They have Tulsa, which I think they should handle fine. Florida Atlantic, again, a team fighting to make a bowl game. They can absolutely make that difficult for Tulane. And then that last game is the one I'm really looking at here, and that's UTSA. That game is going to decide, in my eyes, who goes to the American Championship game against either SMU or Memphis. SMU and Memphis are going to play here in a couple weeks, and next week actually, and then this game is the following week. So, we the, after this week we get 2 back-to-back weeks of heavy implication matchups for who's going to make the American Championship game, and I think the winner of that, unless the College Football Playoff Committee decides to start ranking Liberty, the winner of the American is going to end up getting that New Year's Six bowl bid. But UTSA has looked very impressive the last couple weeks. They've won 5 straight, and all 5 of those wins have been pretty good. And I really like how UTSA is playing. Good thing for Tulane, that game's going to be at home. But if they continue to play like they have the past couple weeks, where they fail to put teams away and finish these games out strong, that can be a heartbreaking loss for Tulane and keep them out of a New Year's Six bowl. So that's why I'm going to put a hold on Tulane for now. And last but not least, I'm going to buy into Illinois. I wrote Illinois off a couple weeks ago. I was out on them, especially after that loss to Nebraska. And then they went on the road and they beat Maryland 27-24. An outcome I didn't see coming. I was very high on Maryland at the time, even coming off of that Ohio State loss. I thought they looked good. Lots of things to build on going forward. Um, and then they go home, they lose to Illinois in a last second field goal. Then they go on the road or they have Wisconsin to come home. Um, they looked very good in that game. Probably could have won it, but just made too many mistakes down the line. Wisconsin that ends up getting the win. And then this past week, they go on the road at Minnesota, who's a pretty mid-tier, Big Ten West team, and they get a huge 27-26 victory. So now they're sitting at 4-5. They need 2 more wins for a bowl game. I think they get that. They have Indiana coming to town, who Indiana's coming off a huge win against Wisconsin, but I'm expecting a little bit of a letdown there. I think Illinois should beat them at home. Then they go on the road at Iowa. Iowa's offenses looked horrible ever since McNamara left. Even before McNamara left, obviously the offense looked horrible, but that was just another, huge blow to the offense as a whole. They have not looked good at all. Only put up 10 points this past week against Northwestern, and then Illinois has Northwestern coming to town. Um, they're still not eliminated from Big Ten West contention. If they can turn around and pull off a 7-5 season, especially with beating Iowa and Minnesota, their name is still going to be in contention, depending on how everything else shakes out. Obviously, with tiebreakers and the teams ahead of them, but they're not eliminated from Big Ten West contention. And I'm not quite saying that they're going to end up competing. Big Ten West is a crapshoot every single season, so who knows? But I'm just really impressed with how they played the last 3 weeks. And I understand they still lost to Wisconsin, but they still look pretty good in that game. I'm excited for what they have upcoming, and I do think they're going to end up making a bowl game. Which again, a few weeks ago, this is not something we saw coming, especially after, like I said, after that Nebraska loss. I had really written this team off. This is who I picked at the beginning of the season to win the Big Ten West. And they just had not looked like that all season, hadn't really looked that good, and now here they are, and they have an absolute, I don't wanna say it's a lock, but they have a great chance of making a bowl game. And so a great job by Brett Bielema to get this team refocused, get them turned around, and now they have the shot to go ahead and at least achieve one of their season goals in making a bowl game, and then everything is still on the table in front of them with trying to win the Big Ten West as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on for the rest of the season. But that'll do it for this week's edition of the College Football Stock Market. Drop a comment down below if you want to know what our thoughts are on your specific team. We do this every week, and we make other college football content weekly here on YouTube. We also do college football content daily on our TikTok as well. So make sure you guys head over there and give that a follow. That'll do it for this week's episode, and we will see you guys in the next video.